upgrading to an LED headlight. But before we do that, we need to create an adapter. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We're going to be installing the adapter for this headlight. So this is the original headlight, the original connectors. So we're going to cut these off and solder on this guy. As stated, we're going to cut the wires off the 1973 headlight itself. Those same wires are going to be used on the adapter to form a new wiring harness to go from incandescent to LED. Now to do that, that's the grounding wire. We're going to straighten the wiring itself so that we can push it into each wire, and then once we do that, we're going to twist. So the green wire to the black wire is the ground, the white wires are the low beam, and the blue wire is the high beam. So doing this and twisting it together, it makes it very easy to solder it after, and a very tight bond. You can't rip it apart until you solder it. Once it's soldered, it's going to be next to impossible. You're going to have to damage it to take it apart. You'll see that later on in the video, as I forgot to add the DLR, basically the daytime running light, so DTRL, whatever. Anyways, you get the idea. Now that you've understood how to feed the wires into each other, twist them together, and make it a nice good component, we also want to have the heat shrink ready. So we're going to take the heat shrink, cut it 3 times bigger than what the opening of the bare wires is, and in this case we can solder it and feed the heat shrink right over top. Because we have that ability, which is rare, we can solder it and then put the heat shrink over top, which is precisely what we're going to do. And I have the the soldering gun is going. We don't have a heat gun, so we'll use a lighter later on. And I basically heat the solder up using the soldering gun and feed the solder right over top at the same point as I pull the wires across, and I flip it over, and I do the same thing again for both sides. In most cases, you won't go this excessive. I just don't want there to be any mistakes. So I kind of like overkill it and overheat everything, which I don't advise for you to do. And you want to do this in like a well-ventilated area. I'm doing this in the kitchen, so it's not too big of a deal. And we're at the point right now where we can slide the solder over, and this is where I pull out my trusty hand torch, and then I just kind of melt the heat shrink, which then obviously shrinks to the wire, and you're good to go. You can do the same thing with a dryer or an actual heat gun. Now we inspect everything, make sure she is good and there's no poking wires or anything like that, and then I put everything back on the time lapse. You'll notice on this one, for the wires that we're going to solder together, is I put the heat shrink on first, and one of the downsides of that is sometimes, in the way I solder anyways, you would end up heat shrinking the heat shrink before you're able to pull it across and solder everything up. So it gets shrunk ahead of time. As you see right there, it's a little bit shrunk. Now, I also came into the part where I realized I needed to do the daytime running lights, so I'm going to have to reopen this back up again, which is not a lot of fun. That's why you want to make sure you have your wires all already together, exactly the way you want them to, and that way you don't make any mistakes. So upon reassembly, I realized I forgot to install my daylight running lights. So, got the little clip, found a piece of scrap wire, not sure where I put that. That's why I always keep scrap wire around. So I can just snip this off here. Still too long. Quinn, I have to apologize. That's one of the problems you have when you're in a household full of people and pets. Sometimes they're inadvertently a part of this. So this is me cutting up all the work that I originally did, taking it all apart so that I can resolder the daytime running lights wire to be able to utilize those extra LEDs. It's a little bit difficult. Had a bit of a problem because I'm fighting the old solder, but eventually I do end up getting it where it's somewhat usable. And I get it to where it's actually usable. And then I just pull the heat shrink right across, and we're good to go. Now to install this into that. And now what I'm doing here is I'm taking all the wiring, I'm organizing it so that it's in the smallest conceivable nest, which you'll see in a little bit. And I want to get everything working, then I'll test it, and then I'll shove it all together and never look at it again, hopefully. Okay, so the lights are on. You can see here, that's for your, I believe, oil pressure. So, right hand side, left hand side, you can see it flashing there. So no lights, your normal lights, and then these are your running lights, but when you hit the high beams, these will turn off. So that's the way that goes, which is cool. Anyways, don't want to leave that on too long because it's a point ignition system. Now to feed all this into this giant bird's nest. Blech. Okay, let's feed that. So that fell down. You know how I said always put the screw back after you're done using it? It somehow fell down somewhere in this area. So I gotta find that first. Nice. After 20 minutes of looking for it, we found it. Okay, well that totally was not it. Now we found it. Excuse me. So the light is now installed. For the final time, turn the ignition on. There we go. So as you can see, go this way. Low light, high light. Low light, no light. Low light, high light. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.